Thank you. Thank you very much. Please sit. Thank you. Well, after an introduction like that, I better make sense here today. I always like to tell the story of how people are never quite certain of how to describe you when you are out of office. So people say ex-vice president, former vice president, but let me just explain how it works, just so that in the future, you know exactly how to do it. So I must be described because I'm the vice president that has just left office. So I'm described as the immediate past vice president. The one who left before me, Namadi Sambo, will be described as the former vice president. And the one before that will be described as the one-time. So very soon, I hope very soon I will also become one-time. That'll take a bit of time. Thank you all very much. Let me say first how very honored I am to have been invited to give this talk to this very dynamic and forward-looking leadership of Access Bank. And I'm glad that we're able to hold this lecture and not cancel it. Herbert had mentioned to me, as you heard already, that he wanted me to be here for this lecture. And there is a deep sense that one is keeping a promise to a loyal and dedicated and devoted friend who would have done the same or even more. But I remember my friend and your colleague and friend today with much fondness. And I pray that his memory and his legacies will forever be an inspiration and a blessing. I know that for many of us, there is still a deep sense of mourning, and really that is how it must be. But as they say, it's only in darkness that light truly shines. And I think that the results that we're hearing, all of the way that the bank has held together and that the leadership of the bank has held together is evidence of the fact that what has been built will be sustained and that his memory and legacies will truly continue to endure. And I want to express again my sincere condolence first to my dear friend and brother, Ige Mokwede, the chair of Access Bank, but also to all of you, and pray that the Lord God Almighty will continue to help this bank to achieve all of the dreams that our brother and friend Herbert had. Thank you all very much. The theme of this leadership series is the future of work and adapting to a changing landscape. All I'm going to be talking about is that changing landscape. And I'll leave the future of work to the experts, the human resource experts. I don't think anyone should argue against the proposition that the business of the leader is to understand trends, events, and policies, and that may affect the communities or nations that they're in, and the implications that there may be for the future of their businesses. The role of the leader then goes beyond merely nuts and bolts and technicalities of the particular business. Because the whole point of leadership is that you are showing the way. You are the pathfinder, the guide to hundreds of thousands. That role requires the prescience or the ability to predict the future. And a key component of that is the correct interpretation of defining trends and patterns. Which is why I think the impact of this leadership series and its importance cannot be overstated. And I want us to recognize that as leaders in the financial industry, there are certain things that you ought to be paying attention to. What are the global conversations and decisions that need to be had and decisions that need to be taken? What are the trends and challenges that can have far-reaching impact across borders? What happens in one part of the world affects practically every other part of the world. And that's just the reality of today. Whatever is going on somewhere else is having an impact here. And it is the business of leaders to ensure that they are fully aware of those things. I must say that for me, one of the very troubling findings is that both the public and private sectors of our country, Nigeria, and indeed in many parts of Africa, do not pay attention to several of these trends. International rules are being made every day. Conventions are being signed every day. But we find that in most of the tables where we're supposed to be represented, we're absent. For me, one of the major, business of leaders is to listen, to pay attention to local and international trends and developments, and do some personal and corporate scenario planning based on information. Now, there are several crucial global and local trends that we must watch. These include technology, climate change, population, especially demographic shifts that are taking place, geopolitics, globalization, deglobalization, the new economic powers that are emerging, healthcare, especially the breakthroughs and the transformative events happening in the healthcare sector, education, the challenges of the transformation in teaching and in learning. But so that we can be at least as exhaustive as possible, I'm only going to discuss two of these trends, just two, climate change and technology. Of course, I'm discussing them separately. And I'll leave the rest to possible questions that you may have during the Q&A session. My approach will be to highlight the issues that you as leaders in the financial services industry in particular, and as significant economic actors across Africa, should take note of. And let's take, and then some of the other side issues as we go along. But let's just take climate change as a first trend that I think we should watch. Africa, as you know, is warming faster than anywhere else in the world. So it means that we'll be the first to hit the disaster. It has and is still experiencing some of the most devastating weather events, and it's the least prepared of all the continents to deal with the damage and devastation to lives and property. And of course, it is very evident that we simply don't have the kinds of buffers that other continents have. And as you know, these consequences of climate change, flooding, drought, excessive heat, rising sea levels, etc., are problems that are caused by the activities, especially the industrial activities of the global north. So we're not responsible for what we're experiencing. The global north, the industrialized nations of the world, are the ones that are responsible. Africa is, in fact, by far, the least emitting region, where we emit the least of all dangerous gases. But that has not saved us from any of the problems and consequences. And the question that we should ask is, what are these issues that have been thrown up by this climate crisis? The first is the future of oil and gas. I can have some water. I'm so sorry. I needed to. Sorry. So I was saying that the first is the future of oil and gas. That's, of course, very important to the financial industry and to our economy generally. What is the future? Everyone agrees that emissions from fossil fuels are the most problematic. We all agree that emissions from fossil fuels are the most problematic of all the dangerous gases that there are. So the next problem, of course, is how to have a transition that is just and fair to everyone, right? Because we must transit from fossil fuels to renewable energy. And how do we transit from fossil fuels to renewable energy in such a way that is just and fair to rich and poor countries alike? Every one of us agrees that there must be that transition. Now, the problem that we've experienced is not so much that there's a disagreement about the transition. The problem is how the wealthier countries of the world have taken that transition, how they expect that transition to take place. One of the critical issues, of course, is that the wealthier nations of the world want to stop investments in oil and gas projects in developing countries. And that is so for financial institutions. The World Bank, for instance, already has a policy. That policy, of course, is affecting the AFDB, so that by and large, a lot of the development financial institutions are saying that we're not going to be investing in either downstream or upstream oil and gas in Africa and, of course, in the developing world. Now, that is just part of the problem. Add to that countries, the UK, the US, the EU generally, are also saying the same thing. That, look, in order to control emissions, we are not going to be investing in oil and gas, fossil fuel projects generally in the developing world. And we're at various stages of agreements or disagreements on that issue. Again, you find that political leadership in Africa is not involved in those conversations. Of course, the private sector is also left out of most of those conversations, despite the fact that this is bound to have tremendous impact on the future of one of the most important resources that we have. So the question has always been, how do we transit? How do we do a fair thing? But it seems that typically, countries are looking out for themselves. Rich countries are looking out for themselves. Poor countries have no choice, but you just follow what the rich countries are doing. And despite the fact that there is no dispute, every one of us agrees across the North and South divide that there must be a transition from fossil fuels, yet we are at cross purposes. Now, one of the other things I think we should take note of on this is that, so all rich countries, oil and gas rich countries, usually energy poor countries in Africa, such as Nigeria, Algeria, Egypt, Ghana, Senegal, and Mozambique, where they are saying, look, whatever we do, gas must be a transition fuel. And I think the argument is clear enough. Gas is still cheap, it's still the cheapest option for power, and must be a transition or a bridge fuel. As far as renewable energy is concerned, yes, it is getting cheaper and cheaper every day, but we must still use gas. For instance, in Nigeria and several other countries, LPG in particular is seen as the clean cooking option to replace kerosene, stoves, and charcoal and all, which are responsible for millions of fatalities from indoor air pollution. Also, there are many countries, especially those without hydro, that cannot integrate much more with wind or solar power without balancing sources. And that's often the best technical and financial option, just for balancing the grid. But perhaps the more interesting point is that even in Africa, where you increase the electricity requirement that is consumed by the overwhelming majority of people in Africa by 300%, using gas as the main source, global annual emissions will already rise by 0.62%. That is less than the average yearly global increase over the past decade. So even if we were to abuse things, we still won't be emitting anything. Yet we are at the part of it is almost as if we are the problem. But what is the response, of these wealthy nations? I think that, comes from that. Where development finance institutions, all they're saying is, we're going to withdraw from, fossil fuel investment, especially in developing countries. Like the World Bank took a decision on this, fossil fuel to buy human weapon program. It appears that the sweeper indeed, when it's just starting, the fact that people the AFT, they don't have major restrictions. The present fossil board is being built by the World Bank, several NDPs, international dealings, who of course at the not is the city base.
Now, the ostensible reason for depriving developing countries of funding for gas projects is because they're saying we want to reduce global emissions and achieve net zero targets. But that hypocrisy itself was laid bare when the Russia-Ukraine war started and gas shortages spread all over Europe. The same EU countries that were aggressively negotiating, that were saying we're not investing anymore in oil and gas projects here in developing countries, were negotiating aggressively with developing countries, including for gas. And it's incredible because you would have thought that at least they'll give it a shade and they'll or they'll ask these guys for them what they are aggressively negotiating for gas from countries such as itself. The second point is that most of the wealthier parties, including the US, in China, Japan, and several Asian countries, still include gas as a major pillar of their multi-decade decarbonization strategy. And the relevant studies show that oil and gas will continue to be in high demand for the next 4 decades before beginning to taper off. So the wealthier countries are not stealing down significantly with oil and gas investments. But we in the global south will disband those investments and not be in the reckoning as major suppliers in the unfolding scenario. Unfortunately, a lot of these rules were made without knowing but from our CEO. And we see this recurring. There's another significant threat for investments in oil and gas. And that is the continuing availability of insurance. I know, of course, insurance is critical to most of the projects, any of these large projects. So there's a great deal of pressure now on international insurers and reinsurers, especially from climate activists, not to install fossil fuel projects anymore. Thankfully, success has been limited for the big international insurance companies appear to line forward and line for now. But that is only for now, because already many large European insurers have shifted away from underwriting cost annually big mining projects, coal power, electric plants, etc. And recently Chuck, one of the big insurance companies, announced new underwriting criteria that will require oil and gas extraction projects to reduce their methane emissions. So we're seeing gradually, even the insurance companies are beginning to think that perhaps if everybody say don't touch fossil fuel projects, we ought to change. But a main threat to the fossil fuel industry is the increasing use of electric vehicles, the e-mobility revolution. Many countries, including major buyers of our oil, in particular, are already setting dates of phasing out combustion engine cars. While combustion engine cars are phased out all over the world and electric vehicles become cheaper, especially with better storage technology, improving daily, and that we see everywhere. We here will have no choice but to abandon combustion engine cars too. The question that strategic leaders in the industry should be asking is how long before international financing for oil and gas projects finally dry? And how long do we have to wait for vehicles, for electric vehicles to replace combustion engine vehicles? Can we even afford to invest heavily today in autogas, in CNG-powered vehicles, for example? Can we afford to invest heavily in that? If there's a risk that investment in gas projects be dry, and then what next? I think we in Africa must be thinking seriously of how to become clean energy superpowers. First, we have some of the best renewable energy potential in the world. Renewable energy, especially solar power, is not only abundant, but we also have very low intermittency or seasonality, as they call it. And this means that as in unlike other countries, we have radiation sometimes for 12 hours, 13 hours, and all that, which makes it possible to reliably provide renewable baseload to power continuous industrial production for extended periods of time. Strikingly, the lowest cost setup today, solar, wind, and battery storage, in order to get renewable baseload for industrial activity, is twice as expensive in Germany as it is in Nigeria. I'm doing quite a bit of work on that in the primary actual platform for Africa, and demonstrated by that it is cheaper to do this in Nigeria than anywhere else. Like we know, fact, solar PVs for Nigeria and in Kenya vastly outperform Europe's best industry sectors and even Europe's top EV sports. So the same battery-supported PV system in Nigeria will enable a base load that is 8 times as large as in Germany, and is paying 1.8 times. So we are set to be the renewable energy capital to be the green industrial capital. And when I say this, I mean Africa. The second thing that I'll need to. The second thing we need to do is through the production and export of low carbon fuels. Now, these fuels, especially hydrogen and ammonia, will be critical to the transition to a net zero world, given their potential, especially in decarbonizing hard-to-electrify sectors, such as cement, steel production, fueling trucks, big ocean-going vessels, helping to all that. And of course, balancing grids. So primarily, wherever you're going to use renewable energy resources, that going to put that are looking for situations where there'll be no intermittency, disruption. These fuels will be the best. The IEA just recently, in their net zero 2050, have said that every scenario that they're looking at anticipates that trade in hydrogen and ammonia will rise from almost nothing that it is today to almost 1/3 of all energy-related transactions. So ammonia and hydrogen is going to take 1/3 of energy-related transactions, and that's their prediction. The past 5 years, I've seen tremendous growth in the blue and green hydrogen use. And there's so many green hydrogen projects in Africa that are reaching final investment decision rate. Angola, Namibia, South Africa already. Namibia in May 2023 signed a $10 billion US deal with hydrogen energy to continue with advanced feasibility studies towards the development of their green hydrogen plant, which when done will supply 300,000 tons of clean energy annually using wind and solar power. Angola is also set to become the first exporter of green ammonium to Germany by 2025. The full capacity when they are done will be about 280,000 tons annually. South Africa is planning to produce 5 million tons of green hydrogen annually by 2040. Other countries such as Egypt, Kenya, Morocco, Mauritania have green hydrogen production goals as well. But again, a word of caution is that because many of these countries are gunning for the same market, there's a need to avoid the tide of competition for export markets that may lead to a race to the bottom for prices. So developing a unified African strategy for green hydrogen development is crucial, which is what the rest of the world is doing. Chile and the countries in Central America are already working together. We in Africa also need to work. So all the development in that respect is the inauguration of the African Green Hydrogen Alliance, sometime in May 2023. But we hope that this will work on prices so that we're not competing against ourselves and bring the prices to low. A separate issue to watch is the trade restrictions and other climate mitigation measures that are being introduced and considered by many global north countries, again ostensibly to reduce carbon emissions. So there are trade regulations that are being made no, that ostensibly are meant to control carbon emissions. The EU in particular is making several of this because, and we need to take note of, the largest, Africa was the largest exporter to Europe in all of the continent, the largest, especially of certain types of products, steel, and then several crops, produce. But the EU has recently put in place something they call the Carbon Border Adjustment Management System. Now, this Carbon Border Adjustment Management System is a levy which is to be imposed on products imported into the EU for the carbon dioxide emissions that are embedded in those products by reason of the source of power in making the product. So a manufacturer that is using gas, for example, as its power source in its plants will be subject to these carbon border levies. So manufacturers of cement, steel, and fertilizer importing to the EU will have to pay them because most of these manufacturers, and talking of manufacturers from Africa and on developing world, most of manufacturers, of course, use either coal, gas, or diesel. And now this is one of those regulations that was likely developed without any input from the countries that export to that EU. And most African countries, of course, nobody was consulted. And of course, the implication of this for Africa is that we'll lose somewhere in the order of what, $35 billion annually just from this CBAM. Now, the EU is Africa's largest trading partner, almost 162 billion in imports in 2021 alone. So we're big, we're big importers in the EU. One would have thought that would be invited to the table, or that will invite ourselves to the table. Mozambique had exports 97% of its aluminium to the EU. Aluminium accounts for 20% of its exports, and its GDP could fall by as much as 1.5% from these CBAM levies. There's a new EU deforestation law, and this is a deforestation regulation. And this is particularly bad because this will affect practically all African countries because there's a lot of export of commodities such as palm oil, cattle, soy, coffee, timber, rubber, along with derived products like beef, furniture, chocolate. What that will say is that all of these things must be deforestation free. In other words, if you are exporting, say, soybeans or coffee to the EU, you must certify that your product is deforestation free. Now, what does that mean? What does deforestation free mean? It means that the goods produced on land that is not deforested. So if you're a farmer, right? And of course, you plant it usually in the forest somewhere. But you must show evidence that you did not cut down trees at all in order to create your farm. Now, that is a tough one, but in most of our farming communities, we absolutely need to bring down trees and a lot of vegetation just to be able to establish the farm. So, for micro small businesses, the application in the United States, federal limited, right? Yeah. And that regulation emphasizes that deforestation-free means goods produced on land not subject to deforestation in any way or further deforestation. And it even applies where deforestation is illegal in the countries that are exporting. So we're very tight, very tight. Again, nobody asked us, nobody consulted us. We also asked many questions. There's another regulation which would affect African businesses significantly, and which has not very import here. But I think we'll just so I don't spend too much time. I'll just speak very briefly about carbon markets. We of course this is a major benefit of the energy transition. and there's a growing awareness of its potential. Federal government of Nigeria recently joined several African countries by presenting its own carbon market activation plan. The voluntary carbon market offers huge potential for profit. And we are at the moment at the point where the market, the Nigerian market, is being designed. And I believe that this is the time for the financial services industry to get involved. Some countries, of course, are further than us. Kenya has a very thoughtfully considered law and regulation. And I think that they're a good model for us. And again, the African Carbon Markets Initiative has offered support to countries that are developing their carbon market activation plans. I think this is the moment where we ought to actually get involved, because this is from the area market. But there's already a scandal for large areas of land in Africa by wealthy populace. That's just incredible. For this carbon credit, through the avoidance of deforestation. And it's very curious about, because you can actually get carbon credit by avoiding deforestation. And so we now have wealthy countries, that are buying up land to Africa, ostensibly for conservation, so that it can get some carbon credit for it. There's a major company, for instance, out of the UAE that has signed about 5 MOUs and paid for large amounts of land, forest land, in Africa. For example, that company paid for 1/5, that's 18 million hectares, roughly, I think it's about 18 million hectares, and roughly a tenth of land in there's in Tanzania, I think the water almost 10% of the land area. In Zambia, I think about 5 to 8% of the land area. They have land also the area, the water close to 8%. I'm talking of actual land area to the bottom. And there are countries that were almost 20% land areas with water. Now, question, of course, is how these deals are paid out, because a lot of things are, nobody knows exactly how, these transactions are known. So communities, we don't know what's going to happen further down the road. There are communities that we say, look, this forest belongs to us, this land belongs to us. About, countries that don't deals that have sold off, that haven't pursued for conservation purposes and all that. I know the state company is already approaching Angola, which is also a well-forested country, for a similar deal. So this is a lot that's going on. I will just have to pay really more attention to the developments, because we wake up one morning, and I remember speaking to a group of after the leaders at Montalto, and everyone seemed completely unaware, even people from the countries where I was talking about, person completely unaware of some of these transactions that take place. But these are things that are given, and we really just need to pay more attention. The second trend, which I'd like us to observe, is technology. And of course, I'm sure we're all very familiar with how technology, the continuing advancements and developments in AI, machine learning, quantum computing, robotics, automation, big data, all of these technological advancements are what they do. AI in particular is set to dramatically change practically every area and commerce as we use it. Just last week, researchers at McMaster University and Stanford announced the invention of a new generative artificial intelligence model, which can design new antibiotics to stop the spread of one of the most dangerous antibiotic-resistant bacteria. And this is just AI working by itself, as it were. generative AI, AI software that is able to do all of these types of wonderful things. The University of Arkansas, March 1st, March 1st, just last month, made the announced the starting result of a test that they conducted between 451 human beings and ChatGPT, of course, and Joe well familiar, to find out whether between the humans and ChatGPT, which was superior in divergent thinking, in other words, coming up with different answers to different scenarios. And unfortunately, ChatGPT went bored on the fiction. So, and this is ChatGPT in its first iteration. Who knows what's going to happen next? So already we're seeing how artificial intelligence and machine learning is poised to transform even the financial services industry in simple. So of course already we know that AI-driven chatbots and virtual assistants can provide 24/7 customer service, offering quick responses to inquiries and even personalized financial advice. I mean, Access Bank is where of several, practically everybody else in the technology, and I was teasing, I think, about Daniel, yes, that Access Bank already has the African Fund and all sorts of other setups to ensure that at least Access Bank's own technology problems are resolved. Although he pointed out to me that actually, the way this is designed is to resolve problems in the industry, not just locally, but across Africa. So that I think is a very good thing indeed. But these technologies, so these technologies can learn, these AI can learn for customer interactions to even improve their service. So they are self-teaching. They are self-propagating in so many ways. AI systems now even have superior skills to identify patterns that indicate fraud by analyzing transactions data in real time. So they can say, look, fraud, this is a fraudulent transaction, this is a fraudulent pattern. And AI's traditional spend, and this again is a preview date, is the automation of routine tasks and processes, and significantly reducing operational costs for financial institutions. Now, this includes everything from customer onboarding to compliance checks. Even regulatory compliance can be done now almost entirely accurate by AI across different jurisdictions if you wish, and can now be handled, of course, more quickly and more accurately. How about stock, currency trading and all that? Now you have AI algorithms that can accurately analyze vast amounts of data, including news and social media, to make predictions about market investments, to even execute trades, at optimal times. And that's the same for credit and risk assessment. AI can process complex data sets to assess credit risk more accurately, considering factors even beyond our traditional credit scores. Now, the thing, of course, is that when you do this, especially for risk assessments, they can lead to more nuanced assessments, potentially looking at credit to previously underserved markets while managing lenders' risk at the same time. But even more interesting is what AI can do in predictive analytics, and that's an area where I think a lot is going to happen even faster and very soon. So AI's ability to process and analyze large data sets can help predict even economic trends, making businesses and investors wasn't able to make more informed decisions. But what is more intriguing is quantum computing. All we are seeing today is set to advance dramatically, where quantum computing actually begins to process and analyze vast amounts of data, because they can analyze much faster and cluster computers. And this is particularly relevant for applications that depend on large-scale data analysis, such as natural language processing and image recognition. These are big areas. So we tried, haven't seen anything else. There's so much. And it may just be days, not even, and these days, if you look up any of the technology magazines and all that, just think that this stuff, something new is happening there with him. There are new announcements every day, new areas being built in every single day. So the next question, of course, is so what happens with jobs, which is, of course, a very important issue. Why the AI is taking over, what this results in human redundancies in the market. What I found is that a lot of the research that's available is a bit more on solid point. One thing that is clear is that AI machine learning tools are particularly good at automating routine repetitive tasks, sort of data entry, transaction processing, and basic customer service requires of all. Jobs that primarily involve those tasks, obviously at a higher risk of being affected. But there will be new jobs, and new roles, which are being created particularly in such areas as AI development, data analysis, cybersecurity, even AI and which is coming a big conversation all over. And more roles will emerge for jobs that require emotional intelligence, creative thinking, strategic judgments, which are capabilities that AI has not learned yet. Some would say AI lacks those particular capabilities. Also, human oversight of AI system for creating new jobs, because there will be a need for human oversight of AI system, especially for roles that are focused on ensuring fairness, accountability, and transparency of AI applications. One of the critical implications of this revolution, or the AI revolution, as it transformed the job landscape in financial services in particular, is the importance of scaling and reskilling workers. Workers need to adapt to these changing demands for their roles, which will increasingly require digital literacy, their needs to work along AI systems and skills in such areas of course of data analysis and interpretation. No one is yet sure of what the impact of AI will be in federal employment levels, particularly in financial industry. While some jobs may be lost or significantly changed, new ones will emerge, and the overall demand for financial services may increase as these technologies enable more efficient and accessible financial products and services. One thing that we are bound to see sooner than later are the reaction of our labor organizations, because obviously labor organizations that we ask be refitting their toolboxes and negotiating with employers and labor and with all sectors, especially on how to prevent needless job losses, retraining programs and policies to foster job creation in emerging areas. So I think there's going to be, in my view, some concerns, labor concern, around what to do next and how to do what to do next. I want to show you a quick clip video. This is so you might have missed this on social media. I'm trying to show you very quickly. This clip. Let's see. Are you able to show this?
Today I stand with you with a profound sense of duty and determination. I'm announcing my interest in purchasing Access Bank PLC and turning it into a global bank. I humbly ask for your support on this. Thank you.
Working out. I thought that might catch your attention. Now this is my own, and this is just showing what is possible there. This is my own amateur endowment. I had completely amateur. If I, as a complete amateur, can make Elon Musk say that he wants to take over, so if I posted this on social media, of course, some people happen to shares. I don't know the search for answer, right? So you can imagine the mischief that is possible.